Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast. On this episode, we're talking to a new friend of ours, Mike Lewis.
So Mike is one of the co-founders of Click360, and essentially he is a customer journey optimizer.
And you know what? It seems like a theme of all podcasts recently, but it seems like we're really trying to optimize every part of your marketing strategy.
Right. So taking your consumer data of how somebody comes from one location and ends up buying, and then using that and understanding where your marketing dollars really should be going, optimizing that journey. If it's not working, stop spending money there and move that money someplace that is working.
And on the other side of that, it also helps you narrow down exactly who you should be targeting.
Right, exactly. So it's a great conversation. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's coming right up. But if you want to listen to it, it's available on all podcasting areas. So enjoy the show.
Enjoy.
All right, great. Well, we're in conversation with Mike Lewis. Mike, we usually get started with you giving us a little information about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so Mike Lewis, sometimes call myself Louie when we have more than one mic in the room because that helps people differentiate between one mic and the other. Co-founder of a company up here in the Twin Cities called Click360, which is a customer journey optimization platform, which really means we do three things so that we can do one thing. So the platform in and of itself is an AI platform that's just trying to figure out patterns and sequences that tell us where people come from, what they're doing on the website, who's going to convert to revenue. So really those three things we're doing so that we can figure out which marketing channels are driving the most valuable behaviors in terms of revenue generation, and then being able to understand behaviorally who's going to convert to revenue. So really, this was built to help the marketers who are out there spending money against initiatives and don't have any insight into, if I spend $1 here, is it more effective than if I spend $1 over here? And then in terms of where these channels are activating against my entire customer journey, what are my best top, middle, bottom of funnel channels? There's a lot going on in the space, and there's a million different ways you can sort of cut data. And one of the things we just wanted to look at was, can we give marketers the insight needed to have the confidence to know where to best allocate marketing resources?
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely the reason why we wanted to have you on the podcast, was because there's so many missing links, and we talked at length about this within the marketing journey and the branding journey and the storytelling journey, and what all this crazy information that's out there that brands have to kind of contend with to understand. Well, I hear that Facebook ads do great conversions, and so you go and you spend money on Facebook ads, and they tell you that the ad did great. You had all these impressions. You had all this interactions. And then you're like, well, but then I don't know whether or not that was the best method to do it. And so we end up getting stuck into is just continually spending more and more money on the same stuff over and over and over again, and hoping that that's the solution to it, when you really don't know whether or not that's the best path. And, especially on this side with marketing, there's a lot of people that They'll talk about, we buy ad space or we do this. Are you still there?
I was saying I might be skipping it out a little bit. And the reason I laughed a little bit when you said hope is that word hope is super frustrating in the marketing world, right?
Yeah.
I spend money here and then I hope it did something. It's the old spray and pray or the guess and test. So many different words that people throw at it, but it's this idea of so going back to one of the reasons that we started doing this, my life has been whittling towards giving marketers the ability to actually get that information. So I started out in the ultimate spray and pray, put a sign on a wall with the phone number, pray somebody calls you back. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those things where, the old saying, I got to cut half my marketing spend and I don't know which half. Well, you have no information when you go that far back. And so I've just been whittling down towards this ability to give the marketers the ability to not have to hope. Right. And I know people joke that when you talk about digital marketing, it's like, yes, throw your money in digital because you can always get attribution. So I would never say kill the old kind of marketing platform, get rid of billboards and see how quickly your digital marketing campaigns die also. But, especially right now, as a lot of the world is going online with the digital marketing component, we need to get rid of hope. Hope's great for a lot of things. It's not good for, the year-end budget review in marketing.
Right, and that's the whole thing. I mean, you can go back as far back as when advertising had then moved to television, and it really was like, pay and spray, pray and spray, whatever, one of the two, right? Yeah. You have to pay to pray to spray, right? Shotgun approach. We'll use shotgun approach, and they're like, well, they did the best that they could with the information that they had. But now we have more information. And we just, at the last podcast episode with JP Dubé and how he uses consumer data to understand price optimization and optimize a price, not just some guesswork for, most tech companies are just like, well, I think it's worth $100.
Right. Well, I mean,
and so that's what you charge. But there's so much consumer data out there that we can really start to hone down, not just in pricing, but with our marketing and understanding what that journey is. And I like the word that you used when you said journey, to get, what's that customer journey? Where do they start and how do they get to actually paying for the product or service?
Yeah, and you and I talked about too, what is that next best step? So when we talk about all this data and actionable insight, the next thing to do is understand if I can understand the customer journey from day 1 to day 362, right? 3 days before a full year, random number. Can I then understand what the next best thing to do is? So we talked about, you mentioned TV. There's a lot of commercials out there that have a lot of sizzle built into them, but then they don't have that next thing. It's like, what do I do next? Yes, we give you a phone number. Yes, we give you our website address, but it doesn't necessarily have that call to action component that says, here's the next best thing I want you to do. Or even for that marketer, I can't serve that via TV. We were getting there with OTT. You can sort of go, I know this ad was served in this home to this kind of person, and do some retargeting that way. But yeah, it is one of those interesting things as to how the world's got so much data. And now, I mean, even we deal with this. You have so much data, now what? Right?
Yeah, right.
What do we do with it next? And so that's where we try to play, especially with like the sunsetting of things like third-party cookies. What do we do next? What do we use this information to do next? And I think you're going to see a correction in the sense of, for so long, we've had a really good way to target people based on the third-party cookie, and now that's going away. So people are going to have to get creative as to how they continue to surface that next best step.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what you said. We talk about this all the time from the storytelling aspect about commercials.
Right.
When there's nothing that comes after the commercial, right? And so to your point, that means it's a double-headed, beast right there, because not only is there no way there's not a reliable way for these brands to then say, or these marketers to say, okay, well, commercial happened and then that resulted in anything other than just brand awareness, right? We knew who the target demographic was. We hope the guy that they call, right? But there's also no reason for them to then go onto the website to continue with that story either. And we talk about this all the time, and I talk about Progressive all the time. But with those commercials, with the don't turn into your parents for homeowners, it's funny. It gets you to a point where you're like, oh, yeah, that was really funny, right? It doesn't entice me to then buy, Progressive homeowners insurance. I appreciate the work that they did, but there's also no other place for me to go to watch more of those and to interact with that story that then you as a marketer or as a marketing team then can go and go like, oh, well, we captured them. Yeah. Now we have them at the top of the funnel. Now, how are we going to get them from there to actually buying? Rather than just hoping somebody calls their local Progressive agent and decides to go against State Farm, which they've had for 20 years. And people usually don't just switch back and forth between insurances because it's out of sight, out of mind. So that's one aspect that we keep on going back and forth on.
So it's interesting now, and I do like those commercials. I do like that creative. To your question, how do you continue that conversation? How do you continue that customer journey? And I do think that the world has come around to this concept of customer journey, and we talk about customer journey optimization. Again, where do they come from? What are they doing? Who's going to convert? And that's just behavior. From the TV perspective, what do you guys think is the next best step? So like you said, we've captured them. We've got them top of funnel. From a video perspective, how do you tell a story beyond that? Because I agree with you. I think there's a story to those ads that they're to be told. They didn't create it out of thin air.
Right. And, it's just really continuing because there's a reason why it's funny. It's because there's some truth to it, and there's some kind of
an exaggerated truth, but nonetheless,
there is some
very,
kind of
very,
truth.
Common truth.
It's
there.
the idea of you're no longer young, you're no longer cool once you buy your home. You're now an adult, like a real adult, like your parents. So it's you just continue that narrative because they have it's a really good idea, and you could just continue it with like 5-minute episodic kind of things that you can continue, because if there's something that like, instead of the end of that Progressive commercial could then get you to go to their YouTube site, could get you to go to their, and then you've captured them in your kind of brand ecosystem, your brand world. And there's a lot more, I guess it like helps with the brand loyalty, because then because now you're invested in the characters of that world. And now you're like, well, you know what? I probably should buy Progressive Insurance. I'm like, subscribe to their YouTube page.
Right. And so what ends up happening is there's this parallel that not many people see when it comes to building a sales funnel, right?
Right.
It's you got to get them into the funnel. And most people, when they talk about how do they get into a funnel, Callie, stop. Look. We have a cat. She was playing with the dead cat.
Yeah.
This is what you put over a shotgun, Mike.
She's
Crazy
very
cat.
She's also made several appearances on the staircase.
I know. Yeah, she's curious. Maybe she'll come and sit on our laps at some point, or she'll just sit in the crate over here. But there's something that's missing with that, because you have to get people into the funnel, and the way that a lot of marketers pitch getting people into the funnel is giving people value, right? So you'll send out an informational email, right, that says, hey, here's this article on whatever product I'm selling, but something about it happening in the world and how we're solving this problem. Whatever. Value creation. This is value creation from a storytelling standpoint. This is entertainment. This is something that people are going to want to interact with. And so if you're able to get them there, well, then we hand it off to you, Mike, and be like, all right, here you go. They're here. Get them there. Like we could grab them and trap them like in a fly trap. But at the end of the day, we do need them to end up becoming paid customers, right? And that's not something that those commercials could do, whether they're just on TV or if they end up becoming like a short series on YouTube. There's no way for them by themselves inherently to convert that into a sale. There has to be that customer journey, as you keep on saying.
Yeah.
You got them in the top of the funnel. We got to get them to the bottom of the funnel. How do we do that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the reason I'm nodding my head, first of all, when cats jump on screen, that's a true COVID conversation. So this is 100% normal for these kinds of things to happen. And to Jack, what you were saying about, continuing that story offline in sort of YouTube channels and maybe even following each one of the personas, I look at that and say, this is almost an opportunity. So again, I keep going back to this issue that we've been talking about a ton, which is the sunsetting of the third-party cookie. Now you're talking about actually creating first-party owned media conversations in your channels that you can continue the story long before I even exist. I mean, you talk about creating value. These are just little ways that as marketers are trying to figure out new ways to create earned and owned media, this is just an extension of that scattershot conversation. So you've put this message out to the world. People have now come back. They've sought you out. Now we've got a little bit of intent.
Yeah.
Continue
exactly.
And, there's I don't know what this was. It was a conference. It was like a webinar or something, but it was just like a bunch of marketers were on this panel, and they were talking. One of them was in shoe sales or some e-commerce shoe sale retail thing. And she was talking about how she was so thankful for The Last Dance when it came out on ESPN and then back on Netflix, because she was like, that increased our shoe sales beyond like that. It just destroyed our projections even in the pandemic. Like that was their normal projections. It destroyed, and they lowered it because it was like, well, pandemic, no one's going to be wanting to buy shoes. It broke the original idea. Yeah. And not only so that's just the power of what a media conversation can actually happen when entertainment actually relates to in your brand. And it's not just it can no longer be seen as some kind of additive spooky nonsense. It has to actually be something that your brands, and this is something your marketing has to own. Your brand has to own its own media and has to produce its own media if they want people to come to them with intent and not annoy the shit out of them with stupid ads.
And that's why we keep on talking about how, attention is earned, right? It's earned. You have to earn people's attention. And if we could take that and couple that with paid attention and then try to convert that into earned attention, right? and start once again. Keep going back to this funnel idea, because that literally is what a business, when it comes down to it, when they look at video production companies and they look at marketing companies, they're like, how in the hell is this going to convert to my bottom line? How am I going to make my customers go from here to here? What's that journey? How do we get that done? And for too long, creative has been seen, or the videos or anything else like commercials have just been seen as let's get the word out as much as we can. Let's make them laugh. Maybe that'll remember. Maybe it'll swim around in your brain, which is directly taken from Geico. Yeah. Yep. There, I don't know if you saw that commercial. Well, that doesn't swim around in your brain. So I decided, that's not a terrible Australian accent.
I don't know what kind of accent that gecko is.
Doesn't he have an Australian accent?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, I guess that is. Yeah, it is. He is Australian.
But, that's literally all they're trying to do, is try to get something to swim around. And it's like, or we could try to make it so that they're coming to us, and after a while, they're coming to us. We don't even have to worry about it. They're already there. Whether or not they convert or not, they're going to tell their friends. And word of mouth advertising is still the best. Yeah. You can't beat it.
Yeah, no, still the best. And something you said was about trying to annoy the shit out of people over and over. So, I mean, one of the things I think I've heard about the Geico team is they want to be everywhere just so that they can. There was actually somebody here in Minnesota that used to say he wanted to be everywhere, so he didn't really have to be worried about where he was, right? He was everywhere. And so Geico, it's just, how can we be everywhere at once? And to your point about not annoying the shit out of people, and hopefully we can swear in the podcast. I think we've already opened that Pandora's box.
I already did it.
I've got a friend up here who was talking to one of his clients about some of this stuff, this data capture. So everybody's doing it on some level. Everybody's capturing some sort of customer data. And he was working with a client who's like, gosh, I don't know if I want to capture that kind of data on my customer. Things like where they came from, what are they doing on the website? And they said, I think I don't like doing that to my customers. He goes, well, how do you like serving stuff to your customers they're not interested in? How do you like showing them stuff they don't care about because you know nothing about them, because you haven't done any kind of data capture? He almost turned the script around, like you have some, I'm going to call it an obligation, maybe responsibility, but you have some obligation because you can do personalization to try, right? We talk about this in the world of sales all the time, like a lazy salesperson that says, hey, I know nothing about you. Here's what I do. Would you like to buy it? Mm-hmm. And that's sort of that scattershot TV approach of, I don't know who's watching this, so I'm just going to put some message out there, versus, the idea of taking a little bit of time to understand who you're talking about so you don't annoy them. I mean, we all get emails that are unpersonalized and they're annoying. Now, I don't need to know much, but if I know at least maybe a name, a business, a title, a location, something like that, at least it's better than being annoying. So that's kind of that. When you said it, I was like, oh, yes, this is exactly what we were just talking about, which is how to not be annoying in sales. The same as marketing. The two teams go together. Marketing and sales have an obligation to not be annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There we go. That's going to be on another T-shirt.
Yeah, right.
You know what? We really should start a podcast store with T-shirts of sayings from certain podcast episodes. That'd be really good, actually. That's a good idea.
Trademark copyright. Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Marketing shouldn't be annoying. Marketing and sales, the goal is not to be annoying. It's to actually make that sale, not to be annoying. And I like, especially with those emails that end up being annoying, and you get all of a sudden, like, they say, would you like to unsubscribe from this newsletter? I'm like, I didn't subscribe in the fucking first place. What the hell? Why am I getting this for? It's that breadcrumbs, right? And if you can make something enticing enough that they watch it and they enjoyed it, or they listened to it and they enjoyed it, or they read it and they enjoyed it, then have something after, not just automatic sale, right?
Right.
We were talking to JD Gershbein about this on LinkedIn, about the customer journey. And from his standpoint through LinkedIn is that people just, to your point, just goes out there and say like, oh, well, here, I know nothing about you. I generally know the business that you're in. This is what we do. Would you like to buy? Right. And it's really like, no, like we were just musing about this, that a buddy of ours, or a friend of ours that we ended up networking with probably like a year and a half ago, just finally closed, or is about to close, a sale with us to develop an app that we're at work on for. That was a year and a half.
Yeah.
Had I not, would I have just sat there? No, I would have done, it would have taken a long time, regardless of what position we were in, to then make that sale, but I had the trust in him from the get-go, right? And over time, as we spoke, we saw the stuff that he was doing. That's what ended up making that sale.
And it's just like, right. And, to that point, if he was like at the bar saying, hey, if you have any software needs, don't mind, just call me, I'll be able to do anything you want. Cheap prices, whatever the hell he was going to say. At that point, we're like, all right, this guy is kind of disingenuous, just wants the sale. And then, a year and a half comes by, we're like, yeah, we know that guy, but maybe we should look for someone else,
Right.
I do find that oftentimes there is the first person who kind of introduces you to the fact that you might want something, but you do end up buying it from the person that gives you value. And I've liked what a lot of the market has gone to, which is not asking for people's time, but asking for their interest and in exchange for value. So I've seen a lot of very well done emails where instead of saying, do you have 15 minutes to catch up? It says, here's a resource, check it out. So for like you guys, here's a 5-minute video. Here's an extension of that Progressive commercial. I'm not asking for anything other than just have a second to look at this. Cause if I'm going to ask you for time, there better be value involved in it. Right. So I better be able to give you something valuable inside of 15 minutes, which goes back to, I better know something about you, understand the business, industry problem, et cetera. So I like that kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then, going on the other side of just trying to invite people into that world and how you can better be spending your marketing dollars. And I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I find that when I see a trailer to a movie before my YouTube video, I'm slightly less annoyed than when I see the same Progressive commercial that I've seen like 20 times. And so maybe because I think that's also, it's inviting you to a different source of content. There's a continuation to that trailer. It's like, do you want to know more about this? If not, then okay, that's fine. You're not going to see this trailer 30,000 times because eventually it's going to go away because the movie's going to come out,
Right.
And so instead of rewatching that same Progressive commercial over and over again, they could be promoting clips or different parts of the newer thing that they are producing in their media ecospace if they produce their own media like that. And that is a little more interesting because then it's like, oh, that's just a little click. I click there and I go and I can watch this other video from them.
Yeah.
It's not as big of an ask, and it's not as like you have no clue where I'm at with my insurance or why I don't care about insurance.
Right.
I'm not even nowhere near buying a house.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think the thing we keep on coming back to is just that leading, right? Is that what you're like? The start of the customer journey has to start with like a little bit of like a breadcrumb lead to something else, right? Mm-hmm. Lead them down this path. And I think that's what's so amazing is that, once again, we've been talking about this stuff for like 2 years now, and it's been refined over and over and over and over again because for whatever reason, like people just don't get it, right? And so that's why, meeting you and then meeting Marcel Krovchek, who was also on the podcast, and Tom Kennan, who was also on the podcast, and these guys that are out there that they're actually like, look, there's some meaning behind this, the work, and the consumer journey is not something that there's so much data out there to actually make that work. So one of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about was the difference between the consumer journey and the kind of data and everything that you can grab and understand between a B2C and a B2B. I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on whether or not the approach differs in any way or if it works the same. Or
I literally just took a note. And so with me and my 6 screens, because ADD can't focus, got to have multiple things going on. I literally just wrote, even if it's short or long, it's always complex. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And so where we had begun was in the B2B space, where you've got 7 or 8 different people involved in a buying committee. And you have to differentiate between their different personas and behaviors because they don't all buy the same. So you've got your CEO, your CFO, your CE, or your CRO, your CMO, whatever. They all come to the site at different times. They all look at different things. They all have key values that they're trying to figure out. So one is looking for cost reduction. One is looking for revenue generation. One is looking for employee satisfaction. And then there's the end user. So we began there and capturing those individual customer journeys so that you had a picture of the entire business's customer journey, right? Nothing happens until I see the IT manager because a SaaS platform doesn't get on a network, right? Until we have their buy-in. And so what we were solving for in that situation was the intent of an entire buying committee. Now, what that was the same kind of thing of what channels brought them to the website, what did they do while they were here, and based on pattern sequence of behavior, who was likely to convert. What we figured out is once you start to segment those behaviors by likelihood to convert, then you could also have a similar conversation in e-commerce where it may not be 7 or 8 different personas in the buying committee, but it might be 7 or 8 different channels that brought one person to one site. Or it might be the customer journey from a social media platform is different from a paid media platform. It's different from an email campaign. It's different from a text campaign. So one of the issues we were solving for in the funnel space was that if you treat everybody, now this is a good tie back. If you treat everybody the same, you end up serving shit, right?
Yeah.
The law of averages is not the friend of the marketer. So back to the question, B2B, B2C, the problem is still the same. What are my best top of funnel channels, middle funnel, and bottom of funnel? How can I differentiate between the behaviors most likely to convert to revenue and not to revenue, right? That's also true because we don't want to target somebody who's not interested. They may have loved the movie trailer. They may have come. They may be disinterested. Move on.
Right.
But in that sense, when you look at it, the problem is still the same. Where is that dollar best spent to maximize return? And when you consider the fact that half of a buying decision is pretty much made by the time somebody raises their hand and says, I'm interested, the problem for both is still, do I know what caused them to raise their hand? Are they just looking for more information, or are they actually a buyer at this point?
Right.
We didn't realize actually, this was a pivot actually during COVID. We didn't realize that e-commerce hadn't figured this out yet. I mean, they've got a lot of the pieces. They've got a lot of like the multi-touch attribution or some sort of search and marketing intent, right? They can pop onto Google and see what people are searching for. The piece that was missing that we're solving for is once they're here, which behaviors give me indications as to who's most likely to convert. And then I can go back and say, these people always come from this source. So I'm going to start spending more here, spending less here. But again, I also go back to don't turn stuff off just because digital marketing you can capture, right? It's got to be this entire ecosystem of marketing, and optimizing for everything online and off.
Yeah.
That was really long-winded.
No, appreciate it. No, because that was extremely interesting, and we can touch on all those different parts of it. I mean, with the B2B, when you're talking about, and we have a business mentor who was in sales, and that's what he would always talk about was like, okay, well, you got to understand who's in the corporation from the B2B side, right? Who's in the corporation? Who's making that decision?
Right.
Who's that decider that ends up purchasing from these different things? And to your point, the CEO, the CFO, the CMO, all looking at different stuff, right? The CFO is going like, this is way too expensive. I think that's just the CFO's disposition regardless. Yeah. Way too expensive. I don't care if it makes it way too expensive, right? The CEO is just like, well, I hope the CFO and the CMO and everybody can get on the same page here. Let's just make sure that this is like, does this actually work philosophically with what we're trying to do? And the CMO is looking at the revenue generation. And a whole bunch of other people that might have to go see it. I mean, we're in the startup space, so a VC, right, of a general partner of a VC is going to be looking at something different than the guy who's out there just knocking on doors or taking all the applications and everything. And so what they're looking for is different within inside of a startup or anything. I was just reading that book. That's why that's in my head. And so if you're able to figure out what those behaviors are for those individual people, then ultimately you can understand where they're going on that website, if they're on the website or whatever, what they're actually looking at, and how then does that result in a sale?
Yeah.
Does that result in them buying?
And what's interesting about that is once you understand that piece of the total customer journey, like who is going to buy from me and who isn't based on behavior, future state is I can use that. And this, I'm going to say it for the third time, when we start looking at the end of third-party cookies, this is now where you can go back and say, I now understand my customer. I understand my customer persona. I understand my profile. So when I no longer have the ability to target based on persona, interest, and all that stuff, it doesn't matter because I'm going to go back and look for more people that look like Frank and Jack. I'm not going to look for people similar to this demographic. I'm looking for people like this. And it might be CROs and enterprise and SaaS businesses. And you have a persona now. You have a persona based on who's buying from you versus a persona that you sat down around the table January 1st and said, who's our ideal customer profile? Which is, again, going back to the very beginning of this conversation, is a guess. It's a hope. Yeah. And so future state, our plan is that people can use this information after they've lost the ability to do some of that third-party targeting and say, I know the people that buy from us, find me everybody else that looks like that. Right? Go back to LinkedIn and say, show me everyone who looks exactly like this person, this business, this person, this size, this everything, because these people buy from us.
Right. Right. And then that's what's so amazing is that it's the full circle, right? So I always I have this line in my head of, you can do insight and understanding what the consumer is looking for. You can create content that then leads to the funnel and automatic conversion, and then the testing and understanding your part of why and the journey of that then automatically results back into the insight, into the content. And it's that constant train. It's more of a circle. I like to see it as a line, though, with a weird smiley face underneath with an arrow. Don't ask me why. I'm a creative, Mike. I can do whatever I want.
Circus. He likes a line that loops back around to itself.
What is that called?
A circle.
There's got to be a name for this thing.
Yeah, it just doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
He created it.
Yeah, it's the line call.
The line call. Yeah, there you go.
What were you earlier? The majority. You're on both sides, and now you're the line.
Right.
Call?
He's the
majority. The majority. It sounds like you're a majority owner of a mine company or something like that. The majority.
Oh God. Evolves.
Right, but that's how that influences it, right? And I don't think that there's enough understanding in the marketing of that feedback loop, right? It's so important to get that feedback loop. And we say this all the time with storytelling. People come to us and we want something like this. This is what we want to say. And they never ask the question, what is the audience actually looking for? Right? That's the most important thing. You're not making it for you. You're making it for them. And so with the work, what you just said, identifying the actual persona of the customer then comes back to, a guy like Tom Kennan, who then narrows down what he's listening to even further and what he's listening for even further, which then makes the storytelling and the content that much more engaging because it's these guys love something particular, right? This love this type of dramatic, dark comedy, blah, blah, whatever. You could really start to whittle this down to the finest of points where you can't even see the tip. That's how fine it is, right? And then that then goes into the funnel, and then all of a sudden that funnel just starts to, you flush away everybody else, to your point, everybody that goes and watches the progressive commercial series isn't necessarily going to turn into a progressive buyer, right? You flush those people out, and then you even hone it down even further. So the content and the audience and the engagement that you're getting is even more rich with what you're looking for, with your people that are going to convert. And then you go through the same thing over and over again, and before you know it, you really have a system that's running by itself. And I think the daunting part for most people is that how long that could take to get something that's a massive, beautiful Lamborghini type of engine, right? But it's so worth it in the long run to be able to get that loop.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings in the world is the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is today. It may take a while to get up to speed, but what you just said right now, we find that most times less than 20% of the website visitors convert to revenue, which means 80% of the website visitors are roughly wasted ad spend. And so to what you just said, as you start to understand which pieces of content, which videos, what people like, what helps people convert, you create more of those. That number from that 80% waste starts to shrink, right? Now it's 70, 60, 50, as the people entering the top of the funnel are just the people that want what you do.
Right.
The self-subscribers. The terrible baseball analogy we always use is it's effectively sending somebody up to bat, telling them what's coming, allowing them to hit a home run. They just get to hit more home runs over and over and over. They just know what's coming, and they know what pitches they can hit.
we proved that with what team?
Oh yeah, right. What team knew what pitch was coming and then they won a World Series?
Yeah. It's almost like that's true.
So yeah, you start creating that funnel that people like the folks that are coming in because the content is the kind of content that they want, and it's just this self-subscribing, self-fulfilling thing. And the funnel just becomes
it becomes its own. It's like it's like a greenhouse at that point. It effectively can.
Eventually, what would happen, and obviously this is like a utopia idea, but eventually what would, like, the ultimate goal of a system like that would be like, you know what, we really don't have to spend a ton of money on certain ad spaces or anything else like that because it's organic. It's all just kind of running, like, to your point. I like the greenhouse analogy because essentially that's how it would work, right? The evaporation, condensation, and fall back down. People are bringing more people into the loop. They're not allowed. People that love the product or service that you have that have been in this funnel for a while aren't going to then tell their friends that aren't interested in it. That doesn't make any sense. And even if they do, which maybe some of them would, right? They just get kicked out automatically. They're like, this isn't anything I care about. I don't ever want to see this again.
It's just the cost up front that kind of can scare some people.
Yeah.
It's the resources up front. It's like, well, why do this when we can do our scatter shot and hopefully make our numbers.
Right.
As long as we change what our numbers are.
Yeah, make the numbers fit the story when you got to justify. I mean, this all goes back to one of the things I talked about. My career is I've just been whittling down to giving marketers the information needed to be confident in their ad spend. Right. So we get rid of the scatter shot. One of the other phrases that comes to mind is, pay for it now or pay for it later.
Yeah.
And this actually came from our financial planner once upon a time. He said, pay for it at the grocery store or pay for it at the pharmacy. Which do you want to do?
Yeah. There you go.
One's cheap, one's expensive, right? And so, I think it's hard in the world of organic, and digital agencies talk about this all the time, is don't fire me after 90 days when you're not seeing like massive amounts of people showing up in the funnel organically, because it takes a little bit of time.
Right.
But to this greenhouse analogy, which I love, I'd never thought about this before. Now all of a sudden the water is free and recycled and the sunlight is amplified. And I mean, it's a self-sustaining ecosystem, which is what you're ultimately aiming for. Yes, there will be some initiatives at the beginning, but ultimately, it should all really pay off in the end that ROAS grows the better you get at targeting the exact people who want what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. And then looking at that from the e-commerce side, right, B2C, right? I mean, geez, like you said, you would have assumed that somebody would have been doing that because of all the data and everything that was there, but there was that missing piece of then tracking exactly how they were doing it, but not even just that, but then doing something about it and being like, let's take money from there and let's put it here because we're seeing a high conversion rate over here. And maybe, not get rid of it completely, but, in the long run, it's better. Money best spent here.
Yeah.
This is the first podcast of two. So
hopefully this
and so
we haven't hit our
more likely my brain is going to start to skip more in the next one.
Yeah, right.
That's more likely what's going to happen. I don't warm up. I'm as hot as I get right now.
Rubber baby buggy bumpers, just a couple times. See if you can.
There you go. See, Frank.
So
try that.
I think what's actually interesting about what you just brought up too, and one of the reasons that I don't think this had been figured out, and actually this was exploited a little bit in COVID, is everyone sort of looked at the world of AI has three realms. So AI really is just an automation of a mundane human process. And then within that, you've got machine learning, which is taking that to the next step, where we're asking that machine to do something that we're looking to optimize for, and it optimizes for that. That's more of a rules-based system. The way we built Click 360 is on a learning-based system. So it's always optimizing for the thing that goofed us up with COVID, which is a change in behavior. Mm-hmm. I think that's what's going on in the e-commerce space right now, is that behavior changes, consumer behavior changes, and consumer intent changes daily, hourly, minutely, right? If you think about, if I optimize my marketing mix for this behavior 2 weeks ago and my competitor drops a price or adds a feature, behavior is now changed. The way that I had optimized for is new and different and scary and is going to take some time and effort and some skin to change. I think that's really, so the e-commerce space, yes, they have really good systems in place. systems change. Humans are not sort of, what was the line circle? The line.
Yeah.
Humans aren't linear.
The line
signal. Human behavior is not linear, right? It doesn't follow the course we want it to follow. And I think that goes back to TV too. We, the definition of insanity, do the same thing, expect a different results.
Yeah, right. And to that point too, though, like, there's so much more information, and now we can really start to peer in and see those behavior changes quicker than we did before.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's keep going back to Progressive. That they are changing, right? The commercials don't have the same value propositions they had 10 years ago. Geico, same thing. I mean, they've kept to 15% rather religiously, but the reason for it has changed a little bit. It's not just caveman can save you 15%.
Right.
The message has evolved. But yeah, I look at e-commerce and say, when I can buy something that's roughly the same from 17 different people, and then something changes, behavior changes, I've got to optimize for that behavior. And I think that's the biggest headache in e-commerce marketing right now is the fluidity of the buying customer journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I for some reason, my mind, I guess, got struck by the whole but the consumer behavior of wanting to buy more environmentally responsibly, support small business and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if that could have been like a huge, or not a huge thing, but something that you can see where it's not, people aren't buying necessarily for price or for like that value. It's like literally like, okay, I'm going to buy this because it's environmentally friendly. Like, I know all the books I buy, I go to an independent bookstore that's in Lincoln Square in Chicago. Like, that's where I go. Even if they have to order it, they're gonna be like, I'd rather give money to you than Amazon, because if I was walking down, Lincoln Avenue and you weren't there and it was like an Amazon bookstore, it'd make me really sad, because I'm like, this is like this is a local independent store. So that's, I don't know. That was just, I don't know why my mind went there, but like that just seemed like a consumer behavior that maybe the way that e-commerce was doing it wouldn't necessarily be looking at people that lean towards those tendencies, and these independent boutique environmentally friendly stores are like, hey, these guys buy environmentally friendly all the time. You guys should be focusing on, that consumer behavior rather than, just trying to get everybody that ever buys books. It's like, where do they actually care about? Where do their, philosophies lie?
Right. And it just comes down to, narrowing down that consumer, because, and this is something that I think, is true based on, this was a little long time ago when we were like, the reason why someone buys someone is because it says something about them. Right. And that's true now. And it's to the point where it's like, this goes back to the beginning of the conversation, homogenized blanket ideas that try to gather everybody in term, gather no one, because it doesn't speak to anyone individually. And, we're all different people. We're all different. And there's different communities within different communities. So,
right.
Yeah. I think the analogy that I appreciated most recently was someone said, so they're talking about sports marketing, right? You can buy, since we're all from Chicago, I use the Bears, right? Like, you can buy the Bears, or you can buy the offensive line, or you can buy Nick Foles. So when you're talking about audiences, everyone's going to have their different person that they specifically like to focus on. So
right.
There's the scattershot approach, but then there's also that personalized approach. So these people only like Mac, right? These are Mac people. Right. And they like a certain kind of steak. Probably a terrible analogy. I don't know if he's a steak guy or not. Or, just being able to narrow down to a specific audience. Yes, we all have a team we ascribe to, or we have a sort of a demographic we fit into, but the more specific we can be, the more beneficial the customer experience is going to be too. And that's another thing with the personalization is, how do you, and you guys hit on this already, how do you make it interesting for that person so that they don't have to wade through everything to find what it is that they're actually looking for?
Right.
And this goes all the way back to surfacing that actionable next step. If I understand who you are just a little bit, if you're a Nick Foles guy, right, then how do I know enough to give you a personalized experience?
Yeah.
That analogy flew off the rails so fast. I just want to get away.
Well, for the record, we're not Nick Foles guys. I mean, we can go on a whole tangent about the Bears.
Well, see, I don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be next year. I don't know who's going to be there next year.
I just think that the Bears should not even have a quarterback. They shouldn't even fill the position.
Just be David Montgomery back there running the entire
Sure,
time.
why not?
Yeah, just wildcat the entire time. We have two halfbacks, no quarterback.
I didn't even bring up Robinson because I'm like, I don't know if he's going to be there next year. I don't know who's going to have a contract.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know.
But we know who we do know is going to have a contract for at least a couple more years. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Only two people safe.
It's gonna be interesting. I mean, I don't know, whole Deshaun Watson thing. I know we really don't have a chance, but that'd be amazing because then all of a sudden we're Super Bowl contenders.
So it's funny being from Chicago, being in Minnesota and having Wisconsin between us. You know, there's that almost like a three-way rivalry now. But I have the sneaking suspicion you're going to see Aaron Rodgers in a Bears jersey at some point.
You think so? Let's hope so. I don't care.
Come on over, get yourself something cool to drink, man.
I don't care.
Geez.
You know what? He could be 87 and be like, I'm gonna sign with the Bears.
This is gonna
Still be the best. He'd break every record in like 3 games. Every Bears quarterback record, 3 games. Aaron Rodgers, 87, with oxygen on.
Yep.
I just such respect for what he does, but I hate him.
You have to.
Yeah,
I hate him.
If
I ever were to meet Aaron Rodgers, it would literally be, I respect that you were an amazing player. Why couldn't you play for the LA Chargers?
Yeah, right. You know, like
some team that's not even near
23 other teams could have picked him. Literally 23 teams. They weren't even looking for a quarterback. They're like, guess why not? We'll take him. We'll go from Brett Favre, which is like probably in football terms like Jesus' 7th cousin, to his half brother.
I appreciated the Wisconsin accent that came out there. Yeah, we don't need a quarterback. Yeah, we'll just pick one up.
Pick one up. We're going to make the Bears fans hate themselves for the next 20 years.
Yeah, but you know, speaking on a marketing faux pas and stuff that can really use help. I mean, the Bears can really use a lot of help on that whole front too, PR, and they really need a ton of help. I mean, if they were to come here and be like, "Hey, we need your," I'd be like, "Yes, please, absolutely, let us help you." But yeah, that was kind of a weird sidetrack, and I can't really remember what we were talking about. No, we don't have
I think we were just talking about the Bears.
We were just talking about.
Well, you brought up the analogy that went off the rails, and then
it was about the ability to personalize versus. I was saying the Bears is like buying an audience, and then Khalil Mack is like buying a specific person.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then my brain even wandered, like, if they had some sort of predictive AI, they could have actually looked at a different quarterback back when Deshaun was actually still available.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, right. There you go. No, I get you. I understand. But the personalization is such a huge thing. And we just talked about price personalization with JP Dubé, which is very highly controversial simply because, and like when you were to end up hitting a price wall, his AI would then determine what your most likely willingness price to pay would be. So that would scale up and scale down. And that's something that he was working on with ZipRecruiter, which was really, really fascinating. And I'm wondering what your take on that whole thing is. Because I think in reality, like that's personalization. That's like, okay, we're showing you what you want, and we kind of understand how much you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that would be, I mean, that's optimization on a whole different level. That's ultimate optimization. Not only are you getting the content you want, you're getting the price you want, and you're getting you're getting exactly what you want. That is optimization. Ultimate
I think future
optimization.
state, that's completely feasible too. I mean, if you literally get down to understanding, so we're playing, and by the way, his episode was fascinating.
Okay.
We're getting down to the point where we can basically see the value of a customer segment or a customer cluster by the amount they typically spend. Now, if he could take that piece from there and say, what would they have been willing to spend versus, let's go back to e-commerce. What price do you offer? What discounts do you offer? What coupons do what and where in the customer journey? If I understand this person will never commit or convert to revenue without a 10% off coupon, Well, then I better be able to surface that 10% off coupon because 90% is better than zero. And so if he can figure that out, that would be super interesting because all of a sudden you're capturing revenue you might not have otherwise captured.
And
there you go.
What's the weirdest part about that whole thing is that if it is truly an optimized price, that 10% probably was already going to be the price he's going to see anyway.
Oh, that's very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to your point,
it just now it is 10% off.
It would be the way that it was displayed though, right?
Right.
So there are people out there in the world that are like, I'm not going to buy something unless I find a coupon for it, kind of people. Like I want to get the best price. So showing it in that form,
Right.
well, very
right.
interesting. That's might get away from, the controversy of price
optimization.
Price personalization.
Right, price personalization. Because you're personalizing the price, but you're giving them a coupon. So it's not like no one else can get that price, but you got it because you went through the steps to get the coupon.
Interesting.
So there is a real world use case for this right now. And it was basically this company realized that every time somebody got to checkout, the next thing they did, the customer journey again, was search coupon for this SaaS platform. So these guys had figured out how to rank number one for their own coupon. So they went out, grabbed the coupon, came right back. That's what you can do when you know this kind of information, right?
There you go. That's amazing. That's right, because the whole conversation with JP was you have the revenue segment and the demand curve, right? And at a certain price, you're definitely going to get a segment of it. Right. But then if you're able to personalize that price, you should be able to get all of the demand curve, right? You should be able to get all the money that you would otherwise lose out. You'd leave it on the table. And so, and once again, it's like, it's the funnel thing, right? It's like, how are you going to get them deeper into that funnel? How are you going to get them to that paywall? And if the discount is a way to get them there, that's very, very interesting. That's actually fascinating. You can actually, there'd be a combination there of being able to watch some of the content, or if you subscribe or something like that, and you're constantly involved with that stuff, then you get that discount as well, depending on what their their preferences and whether or not that was something that was true within that customer journey. Very, very interesting. But this is the fascinating stuff. This is why I can't let this go, right? It's because of these little nuanced details that I know exist. And I know that there are people out there that are either ignoring them or aren't willing to take the risk to do it, even though it's really not a risk. Like we were talking to JP about that, and it sounds like you listened to the podcast. Yep. I'm like, I don't understand why people would get the price and go like, oh no, it's too expensive. It's like, what do you mean it's too expensive? Do you realize that he can end up finding out you're charging $5,000 less than you should be? Yeah, right. Like that's huge. That's crazy.
In that ZipRecruiter, how many? It was 4x as much as they were willing to spend. Or
they ended up making it was like $140 more they were charging. Ended up being like
resulted in $7 million in more monthly revenue. So,
right. Is that worth what he would charge? I know that once we have our platform up that we're working at Workbox, and we have enough because the thing is, you got to have enough users to do a test like that. I'm going to be like, here, what is the price again? Sure, all right, do it.
Yeah, that's your ROI, and there's that immediate aversion. This is customer journey, so there's that immediate aversion to spending money, and so there's got to be that value that you understand. And if they don't see that 5,000 gets them an ROI of 7 million. Then conversation hasn't even begun. But there's also something else to that, and this may be an entirely different podcast, is so for somebody like ZipRecruiter, if they've got a Click 360-esque algorithm, I know he apologized for doing that, so no, I did too. You can almost start to tier which applicants are most valuable to your business. And so you can actually start to charge based on tiers. And so I look at this as like in the world of leads for a company, there are companies out there that sell leads. You can start to tier the value of leads and how much somebody would pay for tier A leads, which are worth a certain dollar amount or always close. Or are you willing to buy the tier B leads and do some work on it? You can start to bucket that kind of stuff too. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how far down that rabbit hole he's gone, but even just pricing based on qualification or likelihood to convert to revenue or applicant value, something like that.
Sure. Yeah, there you go. That's a whole nother thing. That's that's the company understanding their own prospects, consumer behavior, customer journey, to then price how they would price that out to other people, which
No,
would be
that
another
is.
crazy.
That's just that's a cost per acquisition model. It's the exact same thing as a lead model. How much am I paying per lead versus how much am I spending to capture applicants that are actually going to come work for me?
Right.
Yeah.
Change the
Right.
woods around.
Right. Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. No. Like I said, it's so fascinating. It's all this stuff. Like, I describe it as a linesicle, obviously, but also as like this gigantic puzzle piece, because I can see like all these things work together, and when they are all on the same page, it works perfectly. And that, once again, the problem is that these things tend to get out of hand, because then it's like, oh, then you do this, and then you do this, and then you have this like gigantic machine that everybody's like, holy cow, have you tested this? I'm not about to get into this airplane and crash.
Yeah.
And but I know it's like it's there. Everything's it's right there. It all makes so much sense, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm looking forward to continuing to see the work that you do, and hopefully soon working together on something, because I think that'll really, really be able to show the power of creative and strategy, which don't always go together. When you
Right.
say you do creative strategy, everybody's thinking, I don't know what people think.
Well, people just think that you go you walk up to like the muse and you're like, what is the strategy? Like it's like and a lot of those people, like we were on the last podcast with JP, we had a lot of JDs, JPs.
Yeah, we had a
JPs,
JD and a JP back
right
to
after
back.
each other. So JP, and he was talking about these old 50-year-old brand managers who were just like, it's like, let me tell you about the data. It's like you spend all this money and then it tells you something I already knew, and it's like these fucking jerk offs. They're making creatives just have a bad. Well, I mean, and this is another thing that we keep talking on the podcast about, how unbounded creative does nothing.
Yeah.
It's useless, because the only reason the unbounded creative is only good for the creative who's doing it, because that's what they wanted to do. So that and if you can actually understand, like, this is what we need, these are the type of things we need, and you could tailor your creative to what the data says you should do. That's
Yeah.
that's a creative exercise.
I hope, I look forward to doing more of that with you guys, because I like to see if we can figure out which kind of creative drives the best outcomes, the best customer journeys, the best behaviors. They used to say a bad marketer was someone who couldn't prove what they were trying to prove with their own data. Like they set their hypothesis and then they proved it. That's what a marketer was out to do, versus I think now you can't do that as much, again, because consumer behavior changes by the second. So as you get to see what kinds of creative, what kinds of content are driving revenue, you can go, now I got to use my thinking domain brain to figure out what it was about that content that drove that revenue.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And the loop continues. The linesicle. I think it's changed a couple times. I have to re-listen to this anyways, and I'm sure.
But it's the evolution of Frank's speech pattern.
There you go. Right.
It's a.
I'm a robot. I'm still learning.
It's an analogy of the consumer journey. It's also the journey of Frank's words that he uses, and he's in he's in the majority of it.
I'm in the majority of people that make up their own words, or that make no sense to anybody else. So, Mike, we usually end off with some words of wisdom. Anything that you think summarizes the conversation that we had. Any last words? Any last words? I got the button right here. You're gonna blow up and hit the ceiling. Boop. Any last words?
I look at this and say, again, the goal for us and for marketers to have confidence, and the confidence is there when you can understand the customer journey. So what I would say is, don't be afraid to actually dig into the data that's out there and you don't even need to use a Click 360X platform, but just, instead of relying on the data of the companies that you're spending money with to tell you whether or not your campaigns are performing, dig into a little bit, ask questions. My philosophy for 21 is, what's the question you're trying to answer? And then figure out how to solve for the answer. There'll be a lot that comes out in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, Mike, I'm once again looking forward to speaking again, and then working together. And then you're in Minneapolis, and we go to a festival out in Duluth, Minnesota, every October. Hopefully it happens this year, right? For fingers crossed.
Yeah,
So maybe there's an opportunity there that we can end up having a beer together too at some point in the future.
Yeah, fingers crossed we can do this in person at some point in 2021.
Well, what a great conversation. It seems like a lot of our themes are coming back to honing down that marketing strategy, and not just strategy and but actually using customer data to make educated and optimal decisions.
Was I supposed to say optimal? I didn't know where you were going. But if you want more great content, we have plenty of other conversations, and a new episode of Stipulation is coming out this Friday.
If you like this conversation, we highly recommend JP Dubé, who was touching on very much of the similar themes of this podcast as well. But thanks so much for watching, guys.
Thank you guys so much.